All right, there we go. You know, the speaker said, well, now give us a list of the things you'd like to serve on. I figured, well, you know, it's that whole, you know, if you don't aim big, you'll never get the big thing. So I said, well, you know, I would love to be chair of healthcare appropriations, figuring there's no way in God's green earth I'm going to be made chair of health appropriations as a sophomore. It just doesn't happen. It's the biggest slice of the state's budget. So I had a pretty solid plan B, which was I'd like to be chair of health policy. Figured, you know, if you can't have the moon, at least settle for something less than that. Well, careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. And I got it, and I became chair of health appropriations. And let me explain to you what that role actually truly means for the entire context of things. In the House of Representatives, you've got your speaker, you've got your speaker pro tem, your majority leader, majority whip, then you have your substantive committee chairs. And the most important of your committee chairs would be your appropriations chair, because they have the keys to the safe, and the rules chair, and that's the one that kind of controls the flow of legislation that will ultimately be voted on. Underneath the appropriations chair, you have a subcommittee for each one of the different silos of money, whether it's agriculture and natural resources, criminal justice, education, or healthcare. Within the silo of those subcommittee chairs, you're kind of ranked by the amount of money that you have some control over. In my particular case, and I don't know because people have told me, hey, congratulations, you got made chair of health appropriations. My condolences. That's usually how it goes. Because in my world, I oversee 6 agencies. Agency for Healthcare Administration, the Department of Health, Agencies for Persons with Disabilities, Department of Children and Families, Department of Elder Affairs, and the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. Now, when you stop and think about that, how many people are touched by one of those agencies, some way, shape, form, or another? An awful lot of people that extrapolates out to. You know, if you're not in agriculture, it may not affect you that directly. But this extrapolates out to an awful lot of people. And in terms of dollars, it boils down to 35% of the state's budget. So I have a budget that I have to craft over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks that will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $28 billion, plus or minus a $500 million either way. I'm hoping it's on the positive side, but I'm not really all that optimistic at this point. And so it is a fairly large role in the grand scheme of things and will impact an awful lot of people. And part of my reason for offering myself up to do things like this is because I think it's very important to hear from people. You know, I think I've got a fair amount of ideas that are reasonably good. There might be some people that think I'm absolutely off my rocker, which is okay. Some of those might be my kids, actually, I don't know. But nevertheless, you know, I like to think that I've got a fair amount of good ideas. At the same token, you know what, you can always get better. And I see my job as a representative to be just that. A representative of the people that were nice enough to vote for me and instill their confidence in me. And you know what? There's always the opportunity for debate. We won't agree on everything. We will most certainly disagree on some things. But we can do so respectfully, and we can certainly hear all sides of the issue. And that is how I plan on going through my role as chairmanship. You've probably read in the Sun Sentinel or the Miami Herald or whichever newspaper of vice you choose. It is an interesting budget year in Tallahassee. Understand that our budget is a reflection of the state's economy. Anybody here believe that the state's economy is just kicking right along? Quick show of hands. Okay, just making sure. So needless to say, if the state's economy is not kicking right along, then obviously we're going to have challenges within our budgetary environment. Our budget is predominantly made up of a few things that are fairly trackable. State sales tax, corporate income tax, tobacco tax, you've got your other sin tax, your alcoholic beverage tax, but by and large, those are some of your largest generators. So if you stop and think about the economy, when the economy is challenged and you live in Michigan, would you necessarily run out and go see Mickey for a long week? No, you can't afford to, right? And so there's that extrapolation that goes from, well, you didn't buy the ticket, but then you also didn't stay in the hotel, and you didn't buy all the souvenirs, and you didn't do all those kinds of things that hurt our revenue picture. One of the other parts of that is that housing, and I know the housing a little bit because I'm the 25th largest real estate broker in Florida. Housing is very challenged in Florida, and the challenge is that we collect revenue off of the sale of a home, not in a sales tax environment, but on the value of the deed that is recorded. And so when the property values go down, the amount of revenue that we generate off those deeded transactions also goes down. And that is a significant hit in terms of revenue to the state of Florida. On top of that, think about, anybody here move in the last 5 years? Okay. It's a pretty safe bet that when you moved, in that move, you probably lost some things. You have no idea how you lost them, but you probably lost some things. It's kind of like losing the sock in the dryer. You have no idea how it happens, but somehow or another, you always seem to have a mismatched pair, right? Well, lo and behold, when you move, you always end up making a Target or a Walmart run, right? Because you go, I have no idea where the plunger is, but by God, it's around here somewhere, right? So you end up making that run. And when people buy a house, they end up buying a lot more consumables that also turns into that sales tax transaction, be it furnishings or just the commodities around the home. Some people that move from up north will sell their car up north and buy a new one when they come down here. So the housing issue is not just the sale of the house, it's how it extrapolates out in terms of our entire revenue picture. Some of those things, as a legislature or as a government, we have absolutely no control over. I mean, let's face it, I don't have any control over what's going on in Michigan or in Massachusetts, where we normally get an awful lot of our folks from. I mean, but if you have your house for sale in Michigan, ooh, it's going to be on the market for a while. You know, you're going to probably have to call the realtor periodically to get a new sign because it rusted out. Okay? So, you know, because who's moving to Michigan? Nobody. It's cold, there's no jobs. Hello? I mean, it shouldn't be a real tricky thing. So the reality is there's things that are beyond our control that we can't do to improve our revenue picture. And as a result of that, when we go into budgetary times, we have what's referred to as our base budget. And the base budget is a very simple concept. If I were to fund what I funded last year at the same level, that would be my base budget. Okay? Not everybody with me? Okay? In order for me to do that this year, I have a budget shortfall today of $4.6 billion. Okay? Now in DC, they talk about billions like we talk about $10 bills. Okay? But we're not dealing in a $1 trillion budget in Florida. We're dealing with a $66 billion budget. And of that $66 billion, we only have control over $37 billion of it because the rest is federally trust funded. So I'm really short $4.6 billion out of $37 billion. Now, when you put that into context, that's a fair amount. That's a significant amount. That's about 13%, and we expect that budget gap to grow. By March, we expect it to be somewhere around $5.1 billion. That's significant. And what does that mean for you, for Floridians? It means that we're going to make some very, very difficult choices. And we're going to prioritize. And I will be the first one to tell you that over the last couple of years, everybody decried the budget shortage and it was difficult, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? It was tricky. But we were able to rob Peter to pay Paul. We had some DC dollars to plug the hole in the dike. And you know what? We made it work. We still made some cuts, but we made it work. Well, this year there aren't any DC dollars, and Peter's broke. And so it's going to be a challenge. It just is. Okay? And we're going to be forced to make some decisions that are difficult, very difficult. Next week in committee, my committee will be going through a prioritization exercise. And to give you an idea of how I run things, I gave every one of my members of my committee a copy of the base budget for each one of our 6 agencies and a copy of all of the contracts for each one of those agencies so that they could start reviewing it. I gave it to them 2 weeks ago so they could really start looking at it to make those difficult decisions. Because it shouldn't be done in a vacuum. All that was done in the public, so that they can start noodling down. And when I ask them this week, or Tuesday I should say, what's important to you? What is it that you think we can live without? I expect them to come up with some good answers. And it will be difficult. There are things that you can choose to fund, and then there's things you have to fund. Now, as much of, I represent the Everglades and appreciate the beauty out there, but if I've got a choice between buying a piece of land for Everglades restoration or deciding whether or not I'm going to provide hospice care, I think I'm going to err on the side of hospice care. Because, not for nothing, it was dirt yesterday. It's dirt today. It'll be dirt tomorrow. Might be dirtier dirt, but it'll still be dirt. Okay? And so those programs that are wonderful things that we like are going to have to be tempered back a little bit to the things that we actually truly need.